Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anya Harty, Account Manager here at AskArc. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Navigating the New AI Guidelines. We know how busy school life is, so we're really grateful that you've carved out this time to explore how your school can harness AI confidently and compliantly. Over the next hour, we'll be guiding you through some practical strategies to implement AI in line with the latest guidelines. Leading today's session is David McCarthy, founder and CEO of AskArc. David has worked exclusively in education for over a decade and launched AskArc to tackle the administrative overload that pulls educators away from teaching and learning. A recognised data protection expert and fellow in information privacy, David has guided hundreds of schools across Ireland through GDPR compliance. AskArc is built on privacy by design principles, ensuring that schools can innovate with AI without compromising on data protection. Joining David is James Ginnivan, our school success specialist. James brings over 20 years of experience in secondary and higher education, specialising in IT education and inclusive practices. With a master's in inclusive and special education, James leads the implementation of AskArc, ensuring it works practically for the teachers, leaders and students with diverse needs. We've more members of the team here as well, Hayley, Melissa, Tracy, who will be supporting the session. Please do share your questions in the chat as we go. Watch out for the polls we'll be launching throughout, because your input, that's going to help shape what our conversation looks like. So with that, I'll hand you over to David and let's get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Anya. Appreciate it. Now, so just to get started, we've got a lot to get through in the next hour. So we're a month on from the introduction of these new AI guidelines. I'm going to attempt in the next 60 minutes to demystify the guidelines, hopefully make them practical and give you guys a scaffolding by which you can start to implement AI safely in your schools. We're going to look at data protection, specifically around the panic around data protection in particular. We're going to look at that in some detail. We're going to look at some of the policies that you should update, the policies that you don't need to create, and where we can try and gain some efficiencies there in terms of policy and compliance. James is going to be on the call at some point during the next hour, and we'll be looking at some tools within AskArc that can, I suppose, that we think really help, and we can see the benefits of our tool in many schools right around the country and further afield, and give you a sense of what's possible for those who are unaware of us or our tool. And then at the end, we're going to look at some takeaways, some realistic things that you can take away from today's discussion. At any stage, please remember that we've polls going, so we're going to ask at various stages for you guys to get involved. Give us a sense as to where you're at in terms of AI and data protection and implementation around this area. Feel free to drop in questions. Hayley will be monitoring the Q&A, and there will be time as we go through the next hour to answer any questions you might have. Feel free to ask the question. Please, there's no such thing as silly questions, just frequently asked ones. Okay, so we'd love to get any all questions. I can assure you someone else on this call today will have very similar questions to you. And as we go along, we've been introducing lots and lots of different examples of good and not so good use of AI. And again, feel free to drop your own experiences into the chat. We'd be very grateful. So to get started, we have a poll going. Hayley's going to drop it in there in a second, and we'll revisit this then in the next couple of slides. But really, from the outset here, could you let us know, please, how confident do you feel in your understanding of AI and its implications for education? So again, we're probably 3 years on from the introduction of ChatGPT. We've only had these guidelines a month. Really interested to see where those in attendance are in terms of AI and how it's affecting day-to-day in educational settings. While you're doing that, I'd love to give you my sense as to where I think we are with AI today, and purely from, I suppose, from the non-school side. So my sense is that the genie is very firmly out of the bottle. Schools that we're working with or about to work with, I think that they're responding to ad hoc AI use. And it's unsurprising, really, given that the guidelines are but a month old. So for us and for me, when I working with school leaders talking about AI adoption, we're seeing a divide, which I'll come to in a second. But in terms of student use, I think it's by far and away the greatest adoption of AI in schools is with student use. And if you, for a second, take into consideration maybe the lack of formal training and but the obvious benefit or perceived benefit of AI, it just goes to show that will trumps skill, at least initially, in terms of getting up to speed with AI. I think that's very interesting. And then in terms of tech savvy staff that are using some of the free tools that are out there, be it ChatGPT or Gemini or DeepSeek, I think they will be super users. They will continue to be super users of these tools. They're just not very representative of the wider staff, as far as we can see. You need to start thinking about, I think, AI from a whole school perspective, and that's what we're hoping to achieve today. As I said, in terms of the this implementation strategy, I think in the absence of an approved school AI tool, you're going to start to see lots of different users using lots of different tools. So in terms of having a coherent strategy around AI, both in terms of selection, compliance, training, and then implementation, I think you're going to continue to see issues here in terms of AI adoption in the school in the absence of approved solutions. Whatever about the digital divide between, in terms of, I suppose, traditionally we would have looked at things like laptops and phones and internet access and its availability for your students and the divide there between different demographics in your school community. We're seeing this play out even to a greater extent in schools, given those that are really technically proficient. And this isn't lazy, this 80-20 divide isn't a lazy 80-20 rule type situation. It's just what we see in terms of our own feedback that we get from schools. But we're seeing 20% that are really technically proficient, willing to experiment, willing to deploy it in certain situations. And at the same time, then those that are not up to speed in terms of technology are being left behind because of a fear of breaking it or not being aware of the risks maybe associated with AI, and then very obviously not being aware of the obvious benefits that AI can bring with the correct guardrails in place. So I think it's just very interesting that even in terms of schools that we're working with at the minute, yes, it's great to work with those that are really technically proficient, but really, I think now, particularly with these guidelines here, there's this emphasis on a whole school approach to AI adoption, which again, we'll go into more detail on as we go through this webinar. And I would say, hands down, the compliance gaps are growing by the day. In many sessions, we're working with schools, we see, a huge adoption right across the board of different AI tools, many of them free, very little, if any, privacy controls in place. That's racking up big GDPR compliance issues for your boards of management. And so again, we'll deal with this as we go through the coming slides. So anyone that knows me knows I love a maxim, I love a saying, even just in terms of where we are today. I think, yes, the difficulty very much lies in not so much in developing new ideas, but in escaping from old ones. And that surely is true of the adoption of this technology. For many of those that you work with, the way we've always done it is more than sufficient, and more than happy to work with pen and paper instead of AI. The obvious benefits are there, but habit is a very powerful thing, I'm sure you'll agree. And so when we look at the likes of the new Department of Education guidelines around AI, it really is taking this whole school approach to adoption. Let me just, by way of, I suppose, even going through the why do we have this document now? I think many of us would probably agree that up until this point, the delay in getting these guidelines was down maybe to how do you get your arms around something like AI? Its use is widespread. You have both student adoption en masse, and then you've got a real cross section, I suppose, of users among staff. From our perspective, I think the challenge we see, I suppose, with an unstructured use of AI in schools, it can be quite significant. Let me give you an example. Take a post-primary school piloting an AI career guidance tool. Students are asked to input their results, their interests, their aptitudes, and then the AI tool, for example, is recommending things like leaving certificate subjects and career paths. And whilst it is efficient and it's novel and it's definitely, okay, I'm a techie, so it's cool. After 6 months, your guidance counselor notices a pattern. And so that pattern is that AI rarely recommends STEM careers to female students or construction trades to males, even when their aptitude matches with that career path. So in that situation, it's been noted by the guidance counsellor after the horse is bolted. So ad hoc implementation of AI, it's cool, it's novel, it serves a purpose. Everyone's using AI. What's the challenge here? But then only afterwards do we see real impact in terms of the classroom. And so having spotted that there's this kind of bias, then you start to look at it a bit harder and you realize, look, this AI has been trained on historical career data. So decades of societal bias has been baked into algorithms, and it was replicating a harmful stereotype as neutral advice. And so that's an example whereby the horse is bolted, the technology is in place with 6 months. There wasn't maybe an understanding of some of the privacy risk first and foremost, but then secondly, a real impact in terms of the career path of a set of students. Now the school is saying we're going to stop using it. And as a result, you have 10, 15, 20 students who've already chosen leaving certificate subjects based on biased recommendations. And career paths all of a sudden start to close off because at some point, and again, now, if I have guidance counsellors on the call, I do apologise. And this is just an example, just to give you a bit of scope in terms of what we're discussing this afternoon. But in terms of the safeguards in place that weren't there, now we've got effectively an algorithm, which is quite abstract if you think about it, now determining the career path of students within your school. And so that's what the guidelines set out to address. In terms of purpose, can schools understand from the outset what's the why? What challenges could AI address? And what learner outcomes or admin tasks could be enhanced or optimized? If you can answer that question, the next phase of the 4Ps framework talks about planning and integrating AI into the digital learning plan of your school and using expertise within your school or outside your school to effectively implement AI safely within your school. Safely doesn't mean automatically from a data protection perspective. It's in terms of that bias, which I've mentioned in the previous example. It's in terms of usability and in what use cases would be appropriate for AI to be used. So you need to look at all of that as part of your strategy. In terms of policies, it talks at length about updating existing policies within the school. So be that AUP, data protection, code of behavior, or anti-bullying. And again, we're going to go through all of these later in the webinar. But from the perspective of this guideline document, at the heart of it are these ethical requirements. Okay, go back to my example. With proper human agency and oversight, the results of this AI tool would have been monitored closely for biases. In terms of privacy and data governance, it's really important that we understand what type of information is going into these tools and how it might decide to produce an output based on the inputs from students. Is it safe for students to use these tools? And so ethically here, there's several I suppose, elements that need to be taken into consideration as your school not only figures out the why or how it's going to be integrated or what the policies need to look like. But in terms of practice, that there's training and awareness and there's a constant iteration of these tools to ensure that they're fit for purpose and present little, if no risk to you, your staff and your students. Okay, Hayley, I don't know if you've, in terms of the poll, we might maybe, if you've got some results there in a second, you can jump in. In the meantime, I want to maybe just bring in, on the topic of purpose, I think one of the things that I'd like to maybe ask James to show us this afternoon is where AI, with the proper safeguards in place, so the proper consent mechanisms, if we're using sensitive special category data, which we may do in the next demo, with the proper tools in place that have been scaffolded for safety, which we have within AskArc. And James is going to bring us through in the next 3 minutes an example of a tool that can support, in this case here, the preparation of learning support plans in line with the continuum support. So James, if you're there, I might get you just to come in for a second, please.
Thank you. Thanks, David. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm just going to provide a quick demo. Obviously, AskArc has a range of great tools that will support all levels at your school, but the one that we see on a regular basis with the schools that we've been working with is the inclusion or developing a learning support plan. When we talk about a learning support plan, we have the student at the centre and a range of professionals around the outside, as in the teacher, the SNA, the parents, the internal specialists, external specialists. And I'm just going to give you a quick example of how AskArc can really amplify and provide your staff with the resources and tools to embed a learning support plan. And hopefully, and I'll read through this, I'll just get the information in there for you. But what we see is that we start to build in the first section here an understanding of the student. We start to develop obviously their interest and passion of art and music, and we understand they do enjoy cartoon books as a reading or a literacy sort of focus, but we also identify that they're 1 year below. And the parent voice is really important, as we all know. As we move down, we can start to see some more academic sort of focus in relation to, the real need to build the reading and writing. We can see that there's some sort of anxiety and introspection sort of capacity that we could build for the student, and hopefully build some resources for that student so they can build that skill set. And as we go through, and as you would know with the meetings you have with families, teachers, we start to identify some of those barriers. Within the school, we can see, that SNA sort of support being implemented, the literacy intervention occurring twice a week. And what we do see is, at the end, a focus for us to really bring together, and that there's a real need in building, or for this learning support plan, the real need to build the writing and reading within the literacy, increase the social participation. We also see some ability or focus required to build the students' capacity in self-regulation routines, and also, building that self-seeking help skill set in building receptive and expressive language and communication within the classes via visual supports. Within this tool, we can quickly generate a learning support plan that brings all that key information together. As we see it generated here at the moment, we start to build the students' strengths and areas of interest. We see the support needs being clearly highlighted, their learning preferences and styles, and then we move into the goals. As this is generated, we can start to see who's going to be really important to supporting the student, how the SNA is going to support the role in ensuring that we achieve the goals, and we can see some updates. And as we move through there, we can see the updates being highlighted on when a focus or a review of dates should be provided. Now, within this example, you may have seen in the prior section, there may be some further documentation. So we can go to our shared file management systems. And bringing specialist documentation. There are some fantastic recommendations in those documents that further can advance this learning support plan. The next step to this is really understanding that the learning support plan is the foundation, but providing the resources for that team around the learner, such as the literacy or the numeracy specialist or the teacher or the SNA intervention support person. We can then click on the smart suggestions, and this is where Ask Arc amplifies what we do, and we walk away within 20 minutes, a good package or resource with several templates that we would share with our team to provide feedback, provide that human oversight to further advance the documents produced from this process. So within here, we can see the 4 great examples to further support the student, and what that ends up doing once we generate these, I won't do that now just to save some time, but we can obviously download all of those responses. Just one final step is really important, is that sometimes with our teachers and parents, it's just trying to generate a quick overview, and we can prompt that, continue that conversation here as well to generate that communication. What this does, it obviously improves the student's well-being. We're actually really aligning and achieving our continuum of support through such resources or tools like Ask Arc here. We're actually providing the whole team around that learner with great resources to embed, to ensure the student feels supported, but also the teacher feels supported, and then also our leadership team feels supported with having the correct resources that reflect the Department of Education.
Great, James. Thanks a million. Super. Let me bring back up my screen here for a second. So let's just go through what we've just seen there for a second. Okay, so we've got a very clear purpose. But I think if I just focus in on the ethical requirements for a second, what I hope you've gleaned from James's demo there is someone with real subject matter expertise working in this area. So real master of his craft in terms of what he wants the AI to do. So, goal number 1, know what good looks like. At any stage there, human agency and oversight is key to this. So knowing what good looks like and then understand that AI is an assistant obviously makes complete sense. From a privacy and data governance perspective, what you might not see there is, I suppose, the huge number of tools that we've built into AskArt to keep your data secure. And then in terms of transparency, if, as James mentioned there, we're in a position maybe to work with a parent or guardian, and they're happy for us to use, those OT reports as an example, and that there's the right consent mechanisms in place in order to, to build that rich resource library to support that particular child. So that's a real good example, real subject matter expertise, complete human agency and oversight, privacy and data governance by default. And then, as I said, then in terms of transparency and GDPR obligations, those consent mechanisms in place. Interesting from the poll, 54% of you feel somewhat confident but need to know more regarding AI. So obviously the reason for you're here this evening, and we're very happy to have you. And we're going to now run our next poll, which is, this is before I talk about what compliance looks like, but in terms of where you're at currently, a month into this process, the poll might go up now, and we would love for you to give us your answers, please, in that regard. Okay, now we're going to get into our action plan. So we've taken this document apart over the last month. We've embedded into our practice as we introduce Ask Arc into schools, both here in Ireland and in the UK. I actually think that the framework document is excellent. And as an approach to implementing AI, there isn't an equivalent document in the UK in terms of actual process of implementation, albeit the Department for Education released a not too dissimilar paper back in June. So for those that I've worked with on data protection over the last 10 years, you'd have heard me say over and over again that trust is earned in drops and it's lost in buckets, not and buckets. And so from my perspective, I don't think that there's a single other organization in our community that is held to so much scrutiny when it comes to schools. Every possible decision made in good faith, obviously, held up to scrutiny afterwards. And I just think at times, particularly when you look at that trust piece, this is an opportunity either for you to earn further trust or to lose, as the case might be. So in terms of the document, we've taken it apart, and I'm now going to go through this in detail. Please drop questions into the chat as we go, because I'm very keen to answer any questions I can this afternoon, if
David,
at all possible.
Can I just stop? There was a question dropped in by Tiernan O'Donnell in the chat.
Super. Will you read it to me before, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so can a PDF be read and main items recommendations be incorporated into the template for student support plan?
Oh, it's a feature request. Yes. And Tiernan, we'll reach out to you there after today and pick it up with you. Right, let's start. So we mentioned the 4 Ps at the start, so I'm going to go through these in some detail. And again, as I go, please drop in questions as we go. Start with purpose. There isn't a single reason why you should introduce technology in any entity, any organization, public or private sector, unless you have a very clear purpose. How is it going to improve teaching and learning, and how can it support leadership and management tasks? I just think it would be bonkers if you're operating as you are currently and you're happy and your staff are happy, not using AI, then why would you even start this process? Your policy is very clear. We don't use it. I would say for the vast majority of schools, it probably isn't the case. But certainly I think if you think about maybe, I think there's a bit of a time saving fallacy, but certainly there's time returned using AI. I think that's certainly one legitimate reason as to why you might start with going down this path. Think about some of the quick wins. What are some of the large repetitive tasks, particularly administrative tasks, like, as James mentioned there, the learning support plans? Again, with the right safeguards, the right guardrails in place, that might make sense. I think if you look at things like lesson planning and differentiation of learning resources, yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense as well, again, with the proper agency and oversight in place. I think for me, if you start with purpose, you identify what are the things that are taking a huge amount of time, that are largely repetitive, that there's a very clear standard as to what good looks like, so that all staff can readily identify if AI is generating good or indifferent material, then that makes complete sense. And so success to me is you've identified 2 or 3 specific use cases where it could add value. There's certainly nothing here in what we're going to say this afternoon or in the guideline that suggests that you need to do it because everyone else is doing it. This is not the rock that you and I will perish on. Pick some use cases, as I said, and 2 to 3 might be more than sufficient to start your process. If we were talking about AskArc or any other tool 6, 12, 18 months ago, we would have been talking about, building and I suppose preparing from scratch an AI policy. Whereas what's very clear now is the idea of addendums. It's now going to be core to lots of schools in terms of how you do your day-to-day. It is already for many, as it is anyway. So when we talk about integrating AI into your digital learning plan, you don't need to create a new plan. You just need to update your existing digital learning plan. Practical actions, if you have an ICT coordinator or post responsibility or whoever has responsibility for the digital learning plan in your school, you need to start looking at, AI considerations as part of the next revision of that document. Many schools are putting together, small AI working groups. I urge you, please, your techies are great and they're proficient and they can certainly train others, but you need to get the voice of those that are apprehensive and ultimately wary or scared even in terms of starting down a road with this technology. You'll learn more from them than you will from the techies, okay? And I speak as a techie myself and constantly have to remind myself of the curse of knowledge. Just because I know what AI can do and I know some of the primitives and the basic functionality that can be achieved with AI tools doesn't mean that everyone that I work with does. So it's a really key part of the project. Success for you will be AI becomes part of your digital learning plan. It just it falls into your day-to-day like a VSware, a Compass, a Microsoft, or a Google Workspace. It's another tool that you're using in your day in the delivery of teaching and learning in your school. Let's talk age and consent. I can't tell you in the last 6 weeks how many schools we're talking to, and the ICT, and apologies to ICT coordinators if you're on this afternoon's webinar, but you guys are all over AI, and then you start working with students around, you know, chatbots, for example, for a range of different use cases. It might be like a study aid or something like that. Get your consent down right in this regard, okay? Most AI tools require users to be between 13 and 18 years of age. Anyone under 18, that often needs parental consent. And we might look at things like the General Data Protection Regulation, but we also have as well here in the EU the AI Act, which is currently, I suppose, being rolled out, I suppose, come fully into force in August of 27. In any case here, it's really important that you're checking the tool's terms of services before you're using it in the classroom, and that any students under 18 years of age, I think it makes sense there that you get parental consent before you start, you know, those students start using these tools. In terms of the practical impact for school leaders, again, working with schools over the last 10 years on data protection, we had things like consent mechanisms for photography. And so it was just a section that was within your enrollment form, for example, or it was something that you had as part of maybe an annual form that would go to parents each September or otherwise. Start getting that up and going would be my advice. Be very clear and transparent in terms of how and the type of AI you're going to be using. Be conscious of the guidance counseling AI tool scenario that I outlined at the start of the webinar, okay? Understand that lots of different tools can be used for lots of different use cases, and just be conscious of some of the risks posed by these tools, okay? Even simple things like tools that are used for teacher planning will be completely different in terms of student use. If it's free, folks, if something's for free, you're not paying for it, you're the product, you're not the client, okay? So what that means is that data is being harvested, it's being retained, it's being trained on by some of these models, and that's not a fair use of someone's data. When we talk about consent, it's really, really important that consent is always clear and unambiguous. It's never bundled, for example. So we can't send out statements saying, look, I consent to my child's use of photography and AI and school trips and tours. That's not going to wash. It needs to be a clear, separate, unambiguous explanation of how the school will, will enable the use of AI with students. And then I suppose success for us, for me, would be that at the end of the step here, your school understands age restrictions when selecting tools and has some clear consent protocols in place where needed. And again, that would fall in line with your annual consent, be it for photography or whatever else is going on within the school. Now let's move to evaluating tools. I think, look, education first, education sector first, AI tools make sense to us. We only work with schools. I think if you're using some generic stuff, more often than not, it's going to produce generic results. And so I think, if there are tools like ours out there, I urge you to go look at them. There's lots of really good Irish technology companies doing some really, really incredible stuff. I'd urge you to go and look at what they're doing. Going back to student use, make sure that whatever AI tools that you're using, that it's age appropriate. Can the service provider give you data processing agreements? We'll come to that in more detail later in the session. In terms of oversight features, is there human oversight baked into what the provider is doing at a very basic level? And is there support and is there training? And not only training in terms of, can I get 30 minutes at the Croke Park hour? Can you see a commitment to training throughout the school year, if that makes sense? Red flags to avoid. Look, if you're struggling to get things like a privacy policy from a service provider, or they're offering you AI that's free, or, there's vague terms and conditions around age restrictions or otherwise, then they're all red flags. And go back to the point I made previously. If you're not paying for something, you're the product, you're not the client. And so you can't expect the same safeguards in place from paid products. At the end of this, success for you will be that you'll evaluated a number of education first tools. Compliance is very clear, and in terms of features, yes, there's lots of features there that will support the original purpose that we've stated earlier in the webinar. With any third parties, regardless of whether they're AI or technology or otherwise, service level agreements is key. So, is there clear service level agreements around educational outcomes, so the quality of some of the outputs from AI. As I mentioned earlier, data process agreements. Can you actually see the performance of your tool? And again, look, I would like to think over the last 10 years, we've built up, I would like to think the reputation of being a trusted service provider for the education sector. We've certainly worked hard enough to earn that. And so relationships matter. And so can you work with these companies over time is the next thing. And then success, you've got a partner. It might be a managed service provider, does your Google Workspace, it might be whoever. But ultimately here, you've got someone that you can lean on outside of the school that knows the technology intimately. There's very clear agreements in place, and look, you're good to go. Now, as I said, 6 months ago, I would have said to you, we needed an AI policy. I really like the approach that the department have taken. I think that they've taken a very practical approach in saying that you add, you don't need to create new. So in terms of updating your school policies, let's start at the top, your data protection policy. It needs to reflect AI processing activities. The regulator currently for AI in this country is the Data Protection Commissioner. So in the event that there's a breach of personal data, which is probably the most likely means by which maybe a parent or guardian would maybe make a complaint to the DPC or otherwise, the very first thing that you'll be asked is to produce your data protection policy that reflects your school's use of AI, okay? In addition to that, revising or creating addendums to acceptable use policies, very clear AI guidelines, responsibilities and boundaries. Go back to the ethical piece. I don't think you can go wrong, okay? If it's staff use of AI, human oversight is key. You'll see that in some of the later slides. In terms of student use, even things like age restrictions, times when students can use AI tools, it might not be on many of your radar as of today, but over the next 6, 12 or 18 months, I can assure you the use of AI to support students learning, particularly evenings and so on, is going to come to the fore, okay? So is there restrictions there that, I suppose, help the school meet its duty of care obligations outside of school hours, but obviously connected with school work? These are some things that I'd love you to think about. In terms of other addendums, anti-bullying, code of behaviour, cybersecurity make an awful lot of sense to me, and again are baked into the guideline. Addendums as opposed to creating new ones. And like everything else, know that I'm sure you'll agree, or I hope you'll agree, policies, in my experience, are read retrospectively, after the fact, after the incident has occurred. So a key one for me is in terms of that cross-policy consistency. Take it very, very seriously, okay? Make sure there's no inconsistencies between policies. Even have cornerstone policy maybe being your data protection policy, and have everything else referred back to that in terms of things like matters that relate to breaches or otherwise. It's served us well over the years. Success at the end of this is we've got some really good documentation in place. We can function. We're going to get the best use of AI based on the purposes that we've identified in step 1. Everyone is very clear on what the guidelines look like. If we're using anything that has, for example, special category data, I mentioned there the learning support plan demo there a few minutes ago, our policies reflect the need for consent from parents. Our policies reflect, a whole myriad of different safeguards to make sure that not only can the AI tool be used safely and correctly, but also compliantly. The guideline around GDPR. So I'm going to go down through this really quickly. And again, I'm going to send these slides to everyone, okay? But just in terms of obligations, the obligation is always with the board of management of your school, okay? And so in terms of a breach of GDPR, it'll always be with the board to answer to a complaint from the Data Protection Commissioner on foot of a complaint from a parent, guardian, or member of staff. At a very basic level, regardless of whether it's AI or a new MIS system, VS Tyro Compass, or any new piece of technology, where there's a risk to the rights and freedoms of a student or staff or parent or guardian, the legal obligation on the school is to conduct what's called a data protection impact assessment. It's like a risk assessment. If you're going down that route, make sure that there's one in place, one in situ. It needs to meet a certain standard, and the DPC have some resources there. If you're an existing Ask Our client, well, you'll have it. We've got a range of GDPR compliant documentation in your compliance pack, which we can take you through again in some detail. Records of processing activity. This is really important. Again, any personal data coming through a school in terms of how it's collected, where it's stored, who has access to it, how long are we going to keep it for, and ultimately in what way will we dispose of it. That needs to be documented through what's called a records of processing activity, okay? Privacy notices need to be updated. So again, if you're using AI that directly affects the school community, be it in terms of a range of different use cases, it's really important that the transparency principle is met here. So how are we communicating to the school community as to our use of AI? As I said earlier, data process agreements, what it is effectively a written agreement between the board of management of a school and the AI service provider. It says you're going to have certain personal data go through your system and you're going to keep it safe. Now, this is the school talking to the service provider. You're not going to sell it, trade it, or share it. And if you do, you're in big trouble, ultimately. It's really important that you get those in place before processing. Many, like ourselves, would have pre-signed data process agreements. They're all quite boilerplate. And again, it just meets the board's legal obligation. Likewise, if an AI service provider is using some of the large language models like ChatGPT or any of these OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic, they need to be also documented in that data processing agreement. And last two items, data should stay in the EU or there should be valid transfer mechanisms in place. So up until February, all the free users of ChatGPT, their data was being stored in the US. And as a result of that, was subject to a different set of laws in terms of selling, trading, aggregating, or otherwise. Not cool, ultimately. So make sure you've got that established. And again, the data processing agreement is really important in establishing that in a written contract. And then finally, in terms of deletion processes, well, you kind of want to be in a position where you've got complete data sovereignty. And I understand that those on the call this evening are largely speaking, school leaders and senior and middle management. Know that obviously the board have the ultimate obligation here, but that is often is the case, delegated to each of you. Really what we're trying to get done here is that if, for example, you're using specifically here AI tools, there needs to be the ability for data to be deleted permanently. For example, at the end of a contract period, or you've got a request from a parent, guardian, student, or staff member under the right of erasure. You need to be in a position where you can, in fact, delete that data and know that it's deleted, that it's not sitting on a server with one of the large language models and continues to be trained on or otherwise. Okay. We're going to take a quick, as I go through here, I would love for you to give me your feedback, please, on your primary concern about implementing AI in your school. Hale, do you want to pop that up for me, please? And we'll revisit these answers in a few minutes. And I've got maybe 3 more slides. And Hale, you might just maybe give us the update maybe in the next 3 slides here before I get into takeaways, maybe on what the results are from those polls, please.
Yep. So, do you want me to do it now?
What? Please.
So, where is your school currently with AI guidelines compliance? 3% are with we've reviewed the guidelines and have a plan in place. 48% were aware of the guidelines but haven't started implementation. 35% are we've heard about them but haven't reviewed any in detail yet. And 13% said this webinar is our starting point.
Okay, excellent. Really good. And I'm glad, look at the 3%. I have a great friend of mine that I meet at many of the conferences, and we have a saying, good for you is the saying. And good for you in an Irish sense could be taken as a bit of a slight. But when I say good for you, I actually mean it sincerely. Good for you. I'm really happy because it is this huge area where there's lots of uncertainty. We have a guideline now, thankfully, but now we've got to start the process of implementation. So for the 3%, sincerely, I'm really happy to hear that. And for the remainder, I'm really happy that you've joined the webinar this afternoon because I'm going to be able to give you a sense of where you can maybe take this these AI projects going forward. Now, let me go back to James's demo for a second. And again, I'm at pains to point out, like if you look at if I just talk just purely in terms of the tool that I know best, which is Ask Arc for a second, we've pre-built a whole load of tools to do very specific jobs. If, for example, you need to build or you need to maybe develop a risk assessment for a school tour or trip, it's scaffolded for safety, it's scaffolded for accuracy, it's scaffolded for some kind of oversight, okay? And it's obviously built by subject matter experts. So the human oversight piece is key to this. Knowing what good looks like is core. It's non-negotiable under these guidelines. And I would actually say that it's non-negotiable, not even in terms of best practice, but the only practice. AI can churn out lots of rubbish. And we spend a huge amount of our time scaffolding for safety and ethics and compliance and as much as anyone possibly can, and do it to some success, I might add. But then in terms of, okay, it's all well and good saying you need to check, you need to check, you need to check, but what does that actually mean? It's training and it's awareness. It's being able to verify factual accuracy regarding what is a very, very agreeable piece of software. It's designed to be agreeable, to give you what you need, regardless of whether it's factually true or not. So human oversight is really, really important. And then going back to my earlier point in terms of it's a cautionary tale in terms of that guidance counselor AI tool. Can we make our staff aware of the bias? So for example, if you're going to be using tools like OpenAI, or sorry, I'll use the consumer names, which is ChatGPT or Claude, or even things like Mistral, which is a French company, or Qwen, which is a Chinese company, or DeepSeek. Well, look, here's the thing. They're all trained on certain data sets and they all have their own bias. Bias based on an American view of a certain topic or matter versus the same topic, but again, worked through maybe an AI of Chinese origin will have a completely different set of weights and training and a completely different view as to their output. So even that at a very basic level should be food for thought in terms of establishing some processes. So we go back to technical and organizational measures. Technical measures, can you scaffold some of these tools so that they give, relatively speaking, Irish jurisdiction appropriate outputs? That's the first piece. From an organizational perspective, policy, training, and awareness. Can staff spot it? If they can spot it, we don't want them to get upset and just stop using AI, because we do think that there's lots and lots of, the benefits far outweigh the risk here, but that they're able to maybe sanity check this, understand to themselves that there's a very clear reason why it's produced this output, and then correct the AI. That's kind of the thing. So for me, really, what does human oversight, what does success look like here? Really, look, no different to anyone that's on the call here. AI is an assistant. It's not a replacement. You saw there from James's demo, lots of subject matter expertise, master of craft, using this tool with what is a scaffolded output. So the model output is already pre-built. Our goal here really is to expedite, not at the cost of quality, but more around expediting, so that this type of documentation and the following on resources are really, they're in great shape and can be done to that standard each and every time. 2 more slides, and then we're going to get into some takeaways. If there's any questions, please drop them into the chat. In terms of implementation, look, I think for me, there's 3 there's 3 deployments as we see at the minute in our, I suppose, with AskArc. The first is, tool is good. I want to use it for my leadership team. I want to get my leadership team plus maybe secretary, maybe the ICT coordinator, and we want to maybe just we want to dip our toe and we want to see what maybe a tool can do for us. And I think that makes sense to a degree. I think secondly, it's pilot, and a pilot might be 25, 30 staff, senior middle management and teachers. Great, but largely tends to be the techies. Again, full admission, here's your biggest techie here. It's not a fair cross section, and certainly doesn't address. It doesn't address, I suppose, those that are not as proficient, that are not as aware of the biases, that are not as aware of the importance of human oversight, that are not as aware of some of the privacy risks. I think the third bracket then is your whole school deployment, where you're saying, right, we're going to do this, but we're going to do it slowly. We're not going to deploy AI in 6 weeks or 6 months, but more like a year or 2 years or otherwise. In a year, pick what works best for you. I think go back to the original piece of your purpose. Can you identify 2 or 3 use cases and then build it up from there? Not everyone has to be using AI today, all day, if they could. It needs to be a process whereby it's implemented in line with the, I suppose, your school community, your staff, your students, your teaching and non-teaching staff. And like everything, review and revise your approach. Okay, so, I know it might say, well, I have 1,000 things to do each and every month, but this is such a huge area and there's so much opportunity for you to fall. The potholes, it's a bit like going back to 2017, and I think it probably holds true today in terms of compliance. If we look across the business, there's just so many potholes here, so many ways in which you can implement poorly. So ask the honest questions. What's working well? What's taking more time than it saves? What are the training gaps? What are we hearing from staff and students and so on? And make sure that your digital learning plan is constantly revised, just to support, I suppose, that introduction. And success really here is that, look, it evolves based on evidence and not hype. Where you spot good use cases, promote it. Give those staff that maybe were tech adverse and now they've seen real utility using a tool like AI, give them the platform, celebrate their success, give them the opportunity to communicate to others that are apprehensive otherwise, the benefits of a tool like this in the right way, and then model that success. Because next year you're going to have turnover staff. Each and every year you're going to have turnover staff, and they're going to come with a different perspective from schools that have not established maybe approved solutions providers, and you need to be aware of that. Okay, we're getting into takeaways. Is there any questions, Hayley, before we go on?
Yeah, so Shane Kyo is asking, do you think parents are ready or trust AI enough to give consent to use children's data/info?
No, is the answer. I don't think they are. I think as a dad of 4, I think parents are struggling with technology in general and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, both in a school context and at home. And I think in terms of AI, unfortunately, I see parents leaning on the schools to have systems in place to know that something is safe and secure. All I can add, Shane, to it is that if you are going out and hoping for, our kids will use AI and will be superior to us in every way possible when it comes to the use of these technologies in time to come. How we scaffold that and how we make sure that they're set up for some success and that they understand, I suppose, things like bias and everything else that we've discussed this afternoon, that will fall on schools, unfortunately. I don't see, again, as a techie myself, I just don't see how all parents can be up to speed on these things. So they will rely on schools. And go back to my earlier piece around trust, it's earned in drops, and unfortunately at times it's lost in buckets due to circumstances well outside of our control. Okay, takeaways. Hayley, keep an eye on the Q&A for me, please, and we'll do a few more before we finish up. But I've only got 3 things left. So this surely feels like you've been drinking from a fire hose, but I will give these resources afterwards. I'll PDF them, I'll get them out to everyone, and you'll have them for your own record. And again, look, this is how we're approaching it. Obviously, we're coming at it from the software, scaffolding those safe tools. We call these asks, a bit like what you've seen there from James earlier in the webinar. Lastly, in terms of the training and implementation, this is how we're doing it, and I hope for those that are on this that you'll use it in terms of your own adoption. So takeaways: I love simple things like, can we, in terms of, can we make it simpler, safer, supported, and sustainable? Look, I think if you're going down the route now of adopting AI, give yourself a bit of time, okay? If you can give yourself some clear timelines, it removes the guesswork. I'm going to be, what are we now? Look, it's almost the first week of December, and we've got Christmas coming. By Paddy's Day, I'm going to have, gone through some tools that are available. I'll have done my due diligence. I'll have squared away things like data protection, impact assessments, and data processing agreements, and I'll have gone through the whole board approval piece. Maybe in weeks 4 to 6, I'll have all that stuff signed up. I'll have created some staff accounts, and I'll have sunset some non-compliant tools. That's really important. At the minute, with the multitude of, I'm going to say staff for a second, using free AI tools, it's a form of cognitive dissonance. It is a form of, there's no way anyone on this call here can implement an AI strategy if you're trying to train out staff across 6 or 8 different tools, because different staff like different types of interfaces, or the way different tools present different things. So again, I'm going to go into the next slide here. Pick a tool to start with, do it right, do the compliance piece right, do the training right, and then sunset those non-compliant tools, those non-school approved tools. Makes complete sense for me. So then go on in training. Look, I think the use case, for example, in some of the STEM subjects around AI is completely different to the use cases for leadership and management. It's completely different to the use cases for, be it student use, or is completely different to guidance or SEN. I think you need to look at training that actually reflects what the roles actually do, and how your AI tool can actually support those roles in a meaningful way. And then I think once you're up and going, you're not going to see the results immediately, but it's important that you're aware of what good looks like. So if you've seen there in the other slides, I keep talking about what the success criteria must be. Always keep it in mind. Success to me is X. It might be time returned or saved, whatever that means. It might be in terms of well-being. It's a qualitative assessment, but staff are happier. They've got a bit more time in the evening, or at least that's our feeling as a team. Please take into consideration the cost benefit of using a single provider or multiple providers. If, for example, you're using tools that are free, I'm going to say it one more time, you're not the client, you're the product. Your data has been sold, your data has been shared, it's been aggregated, it's being retained indefinitely. Again, if you're going down the route of free tools, you're going to have multiple tools to train out. You're going to have multiple silos to keep on top of. You're going to have multiple compliance obligations to fulfill. Those benefits are they're outweighed by a single provider or single providers. Because I don't think there's going to be one single provider, but surely there will be one or two, and there'll be more than sufficient for the use cases within the school. Even simple things. Just, if you don't mind me, for a second, going slightly off-piste, simple things for us when we're onboarding school is around things like, this is the URL to log in. This is the support where you can contact support and get some support on some technical issue. It's safer. You're doing one set of due diligence versus multiple. Even in terms of training, you've got training on one tool. There's big impact there, and I think you'll see that as you go on over the next few months. And finally, what's measured is managed, and surely there's not a single in terms of any type of a strategy, there must be a result. For us, in 12 months' time, what are we looking to achieve? I don't think there's a single software tool out there that can't be measured and in terms of how successful it is. So tools like, again, slightly biased, but in terms of AskArc, we actively can manage the performance of the tool. We can map it to well-being. We can map it to things like time return to staff. Please take that into consideration. That's your quantitative assessment. Your qualitative assessment, your surveys, trying to figure out, well, is this improving or is it, unfortunately affecting in a negative fashion some aspect of our school? Now, folks, I know what you, but I'm absolutely wrecked after that. That's an hour of that we've spent the last 4 weeks preparing for. I hope it was coherent. I hope it gave you a real sense as to maybe how you can start to establish an AI strategy in your schools. Would love some feedback even after today. Please feel free to reach out to me and send me an email if you have any feedback. I'm really interested in constructive feedback. And on that there, Hayley, are there any questions before we finish up?
No, all answered.
All answered. Folks, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on the call. We've had, it's our largest webinar with well over 140 people registered for this event. So we're just really pleased with the support. And as always, thank you so much. We'll send out the slides over the next day or so, and you'll have the recording in the next couple of hours. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. All the best. Bye-bye.